Welcome everybody on this fine Wednesday to this employer panel on neurodiversity and careers. My name is Mark Allen. I'm a careers consultant in the careers service, and some of you, or maybe all of you, will know this week is the Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is an initiative to recognise the strengths and talents of neurodiversity across the UK. And as part of my role, I work with students who are neurodiverse, and we think there's such value in this session. Without further ado, actually, I'm going to introduce, we'll get the panel to introduce themselves just briefly. So a very big welcome to Kim and Ellen from PwC. If you could just quickly introduce yourself, that'd be fantastic.
Super. Shall I go first? Just jump straight in there. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Whippy, and I'm in our diversity and inclusion team at PwC, and my role has a particular focus on disability inclusion. Really happy to be with you this afternoon. Happy Neurodiversity Celebration Week.
Lovely. And my name's Ellen. So I work kind of alongside, or not directly alongside Kim, but I'm part of the student recruitment team. So recruiting for a real various number of roles for students, including kind of graduates and also school and college leavers and things like that. So happy to talk, really happy to be here and talk about anything sort of neurodiversity inclusive and support sort of Kim in this session as well about what PwC's attitudes are.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Ellen and Kim. And also we have a couple of representatives from the Wellcome Trust. And so Gary and Nicole, if you could please introduce yourself, that'd be great. And welcome, by the way. Ooh.
See, you did it first. It's always one of those cliches that we have when we have a new starter in the organisation. It's the number of times they might hear "welcome to welcome" in the first few days is kind of embarrassing. But hello everybody, my name's Gary Franklin. I'm the head of talent acquisition at Wellcome Trust, responsible for the recruiting process for all of our experienced hires, all the way up through to our board and our executive within the organisation.
Hi, I'm Nicole Randall and I'm the Early Careers Manager at Wellcome. So I look after our graduate programmes, our apprenticeship programme and our summer internships. And again, yes, apologies you can't see me on camera due to tech issues, but I am here and happy to represent.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Gary and Nicole, and welcome to all of you, and welcome to all students as well. So to give a brief intro to why we're having this session, with students I work with as the disability specialist within the careers service, I work with a lot of students who are neurodiverse, including dyslexia, autism, ADHD and the like. And occasionally students have had negative perspectives of employers in the workplace based on maybe their own experiences or just what they've heard. So the reason we're having this session kind of ties in with the Neurodiversity Celebration Week is to give students an opportunity to ask questions to these representatives of two very different companies that you can ask in a safe environment. And hopefully the outcome of this will show, firstly, that neurodiversity is valued by employers. And secondly, hopefully you'll get some pointers and advice and tips when thinking about careers, employers and recruitment processes, perhaps with PwC and Wellcome Trust, but also more broadly than that as well. As I mentioned, I've asked students to submit questions before this event, and that's been really useful. I've had a lot of submissions from the Slido website and also from email. And there's been some excellent questions, which I've kind of summarised because a few of them kind of crossed over. And I'm going to put it to the panel now, one by one, surprisingly enough. So to kick off with this, I'd just like to ask the panel, maybe I'll pick on an organisation first, just to make so you don't have that awkward, shall I go or shall I not go? So I'm going to pick on PwC first, but then obviously the Wellcome Trust you can butt in afterwards. How is neurodiversity valued in your organisation?
Shall I do the honours of starting us off, Ellen? So I think for us, we're very sort of attuned to the conversation that we've been seeing happening for a few years now about neurodiversity as a competitive advantage, and really sort of recognising that that although people who are neurodifferent may have areas where they find things a bit more challenging or need some support, and we're absolutely prepared to help with that, that on the flip side, they're also going to have really strong strengths, and that is kind of course, that's immensely valued by us as an organisation. But reflecting on this a bit, I don't just want to kind of sit here and repeat cliches at you all. I think I really want to try and relate this to PwC and how we work as an organisation. For us, because we're in the business of professional services, we're about kind of delivering for clients and delivering work for kind of other organisations. And for that to be of the highest quality, we really need the teams doing that work to be composed of lots of different brains and lots of different people. So we need people who are really creative, or people who might be able to hyper-focus, or people who are great with relationships, people who are resilient, all sorts of different people. And we're not going to achieve those great client outcomes by having people who all think the same way. So I think for us, it's the value of neurodiversity is really about just how different people are as an individual and what they kind of contribute to that whole.
Very interesting. Thanks very much for that, Kim. Welcome, Trust. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Gary, do you want to go or would you like me to go?
You're talking, you carry on.
Yeah, so it's a similar concept really, but Welcome is all about improving health for all, whether that's mental health or physical health. And so for us, it is about being able to reach absolutely everyone in terms of the work that we do. And we do a lot of public engagement, whether that's through, science or policy, through the Welcome Collection, and arts. So we have all these different areas that come together to tackle big health challenges. And, if we are going to reach absolutely everybody, then we need to have a good understanding of how we might go about doing that. And so having, much like Kim said, people contribute to the work that we do. And we have indeed, of course, interest groups and networks, and we do have one on neurodiversity. So having those people be able to input into the work that we do and sense check the work that we do, how we design our processes and how we deliver them, really ensures that we can absolutely land everything that we do with as broad a range of people as possible. So it does definitely come back to that, it's a sort of positive addition or benefit for us to have those viewpoints.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that. Excellent. I mean, there's a very clear message there of diversity is useful and key, and there, I believe there is actually research that kind of demonstrates that it's not just theory, and that's useful. And students could be using their diversity as a kind of term to show their difference, and because that can be a strength, I guess. Yeah. All right. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Anything else to add, or shall I move on?
No, I was just going to elaborate. And I think you touched upon it there, Mark, as did Kim. There are areas of work in a lot of businesses where having having neurodiversity elements will be a distinct advantage. Creativity, the way of thinking, that clarity of thinking in some aspects, and you think of those structures where there is a distinct advantage, and many organizations don't embrace that. And I get a sense from hearing what Kim and Ellen were saying just now, and certainly the way Welcome approach things is that we do embrace that, and we encourage it in many regards, working very hard with our managers, because as Nicole said, our mission and our strategy is to improve the health of the world. And we would be sort of hypocritical if we didn't actually do it ourselves internally, as well as promoting it externally. So it's something that we're incredibly sensitive to.
That's great. Thanks, Gary. That's really interesting, actually. I think that's a really key point there. We didn't pick your organizations by accident. We worked with you on various initiatives previously, and you've both been shown to be very inclusive organizations. But you mentioned that not all organizations embrace that, Gary. That's really interesting. I'm just wondering, this next question I have, and there are definitely some that are more proactive and are further down the line in recognizing the business case for diverse workforce. But what makes two questions in one, really? What makes an employer inclusive, and why should students consider applying to your organization in particular? Maybe if we start this time with the Welcome Trust, if we go that way around this time.
Shall I answer the first half of that question and then pass you over to Nicole to answer the student-related one? So what makes us inclusive? Well, there's so many different aspects to that. I could be here all day, to be honest with you. You know, I'll give you I'm in my 50s. I've worked for so many different organisations a long time, and I've never come across an organisation. I've been at Wellcome 2.5 years, and I've not worked with an organisation of this size and ambition. You know, I've worked for monster organisations, but you know, nothing that's got a huge ambition to be as open, as transparent, and as inclusive, to the point where we're now changing. We used to have a department called Diversity and Inclusion. It's now called Culture, Equality and Inclusion, because we want to make sure that everyone, if they are included, they're included on an equal footing. And that's recalibrating the scales, the balance, so that if people are struggling in one direction, they're advantaged in another, for example, or we recalibrate to make sure that if people are struggling in one direction, they're brought up and allowances are made so that they can contribute on equal footing. And that's the same regardless of whatever protected characteristics or diversity agenda we have. Yeah, so from our point of view, Nicole's mentioned it already, that we have the disability interest group, of which neurodiversity has a subset, and that's a large group because we embrace all issues around what we call, what people would call disability. We've also started a big campaign recently, and people may have seen it in the press and they've seen it on our website, about anti-racism. So instead of just being ethnically diverse, we're going out of our way to be anti-racist, but at the same time, that's hand in hand with being anti-ableist. Yeah, making sure that we are challenging the status quo or the accepted way of doing things or the legacy way of doing things when it comes to maybe discrimination, subliminal or unconscious, against people from those ableist backgrounds. So we've got those agendas that we're following up on right now. And then when it comes to recruitment point of view, bringing people into the organisation, and when I first started 2.5 years ago, there was no recruitment function. So everything that I've built around now, everything we've created for the experienced hires is underpinned by diversity and inclusivity, making sure that we are addressing everything, but making sure we're fair and we're not skewing it on a particular priority over and above another and forgetting one or the other. So I work very, very closely with our culture, equality or culture, equity and inclusion team in every aspect of recruitment, and make sure that we've got those. And when it comes to recruitment, we advertise on specialist forums. We make adjustments and allowances, within reason. And I say within reason because we listen to people to make sure that those adjustments are there. And then when people start, we onboard them with those adjustments. And make sure that those adjustments people are aware, our facilities teams are aware, so those adjustments can follow someone's location around the building should they need to move desk, etc., etc. Sorry, a lot of words there. As I say, I could talk for hours. It's a pet subject of mine. So, but I'll hand you over to Nicole, because obviously an element of this is how can students get into Wellcome at that entry level, and Nicole's better equipped to answer that one than I am.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so just very briefly, from an early career perspective, we actually, yes, we do put out a lot of information about our programs on the website. We do have a diversity and inclusion statement, and also we talk about reasonable adjustments. So hopefully that sends the right message to prospective candidates that we are really keen to hear from them, and we make sure that our statements link to our diversity and inclusion pages. So we hope that sends out a very positive message to people that we'd love your applications. I won't get into the detail of adjustments, but what we do use is a fantastic system called Applied, which actually puts diversity and inclusion at the centre of recruitment processes for early careers. And it means that we can actually blind review all of the applications that we get. That means the applications are purely, we don't look at CVs, we don't look at names, we don't look at anything that could introduce unconscious bias, and we make sure that at least 2 people are reviewing at any given point in time. So, you know, it's very much at the forefront of how we go about things at Wellcome, as Gary has indicated. Now, I won't get into the details of adjustments because that might be something we want to talk more at length about, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of how we, you know, approach things.
That's very useful. Thank you very much, Nicole. Without further ado, I'm going to throw you straight over to Ellen and Kim with the same question. What makes an employer inclusive, and why should they people consider PwC in particular?
Fab, yeah, thank you. I'll just jump in there, Kim, if that's okay, just from a recruitment perspective, and then definitely you'll be able to add to it. But I think I would say I'm really proud to work at PwC, and having sort of recently joined the recruitment team, I was a member of the business before. I've been able to work kind of with the external side, but also now internally, and we really are doing a lot in that sort of diversity and inclusion space. And I think it's just really opened up eyes to see that, you know, we really are proud and keen to have sort of everybody and anybody join that's passionate about the roles and professional services, and being able to kind of be a part of the Diversity and Inclusion Week that we did hold back in the autumn. We had a day for sort of racial equality and gender equality, and also that disability awareness day as well, having a key member of the business who actually had a spinal injury, so obviously the more sort of physical disability, but just talking about the support that PwC gave him during his time, I think was something, a really important message for students to be able to listen to and understand what we can actively do and support, and that it doesn't need to be off-putting if you feel like you are going to be held back or anything like that. So it's been really eye-opening for me to see, and like sort of Nicole was saying, we're doing a lot in the recruitment space to be able to sort of cater for everybody's needs, and we can go on to reasonable adjustments later on. But Kim, if there's anything to add to that, then by all means jump in there.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Ellen. So I think while kind of Gary and Nicole and Ellen were talking, I've been nodding along, especially Gary, when you mentioned that culture is included in your internal department's name, because I think for me, reflecting on the question, what makes an employer inclusive, it's really that culture piece. It's like, it's not just what an organization says they does, but what they actually do in practice and how they live that day to day and how the people that work there can experience that. So I think for us, like at PwC, we talk about creating a culture of belonging, and we have something that we call everyday inclusion, which is a whole program of, I guess, awareness, but also activities that people can get involved in. And we theme it month by month, and we have done a month on neurodiversity last year. And we sort of help people incorporate those practices around culture and belonging into their everyday interactions. And we do a lot where we want people to feel that they are part of that conversation. So it's not just kind of an HR activity that we're saying, right, this is the right thing to be doing, but we have listening groups. We have a whole network of what we call our inclusion people networks, of which a disability network is one. And we hear what they're telling us. And the kind of what Gary mentioned about how kind of different aspects of your personal identity might cross over. We've been hearing a lot past year around kind of anti-racism and the response to Black Lives Matter, and we had listening groups with our Black colleagues and heard about microaggressions, but we've been doing that with our other groups as well, and I think they really all come together to create that experience of inclusion that we can respond to and make sure is actually kind of in our values. I think if I could maybe offer a little bit of advice, because I understand that it's quite a lot of companies talk about being inclusive, which is fantastic, but if you want to actually understand what should I be looking for, I'd say maybe look at their websites and see actually who they're working with, what activities they are doing. You know, do they have information about adjustments on their website? And I think that's something that we're doing. Lots of organizations will have that information, so you'll be able to actually look and see what they might be practicing in reality.
I think that's really valuable, actually. And we talk about, so I think it's great. Yeah, the culture of inclusion in both your organizations is phenomenal. And from my perspective, the advice that I quite often am giving students is exactly that. Do vet who you're applying to. With larger organizations, particularly, I can sometimes use, and I'm not sort of signing up to you here, but PwC's website is very good because it does have kind of videos and statements and talks about networks, internal networks that you have for support for disabled students in general and this kind of thing. So that's kind of great. And for larger organizations, students can do their research, really. For smaller organizations, and people like the Wellcome Trust aren't as big, but you do have some good stuff on your website, I think. But there's also for kind of smaller organizations, often like LinkedIn is a wonderful, because admittedly there's people who are watching this who are going to be interested in PwC and Wellcome Trust, but for the other couple of people, LinkedIn's fantastic because you can look at the people, you can find an organization's subpage, you can look and see if they have people with job titles of inclusivity officer or diversity champion and this kind of thing, or somewhere within their profile, and you can see if the organization kind of means it. Like I think somebody made a comment, and I forgot who it was. I wrote it down, but I can't read my own writing. That on the outside, sometimes companies have this veneer of inclusivity, just like the disability confident scheme is great, and it's a box ticked, but sometimes it's just a kind of badge that some companies seem to tick the box of, but it doesn't reflect the whole organization. So there's more that you could be doing to vet that organization, and so some great tips there. Thank you so much for that. And I recognise that this isn't about me, although I'm obviously quite passionate about it and do tend to witter on. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Just to keep going in this kind of the way we're going, I'm going to start with the PwC. If you can, when students disclose, or when should, in the process of the recruitment process, when do you think students should disclose their neurodiversity to you? So Kim and Ellen, please.
Yeah. Shall I start, Ellen? Because and then hand over to you if you'd like to add anything. I'm quite close to our adjustments process in recruitment, and I work closely with the team that will actually, should you choose to apply and request an adjustment, the team that will talk to you about it and make sure we're getting the right thing in place. So I'd actually sort of take a step back from the question and say, in the first instance, when you're thinking about disclosing, don't necessarily perhaps worry about, you need to tell us about a condition or a diagnosis. And what we're interested in is actually how you're impacted by that condition that you may have. In fact, we recognise that you may not even have a diagnosis necessarily. They can be quite complicated to access sometimes. So we're not interested in the name of what you have per se, but we're interested in how that impacts you. So if you come to us and tell us, I have dyslexia, the first thing we'll ask you is, okay, how does that impact you? How will that affect you in our recruitment process? Let's talk about any barriers you might face and how we might be able to support with that. And we'll have that kind of conversation with you. So I guess that's the what, like the what do we want to know from you? In terms of when, I think as soon as it's relevant, as soon as you feel actually this might impact my application, I might need to do something differently here. That's really the ideal point to tell us before you've sat any kind of assessment, so we can put stuff in place in advance. We actually, should you choose to apply, we actually give you a space in the application form to share with us anything that you think you might need or any information that you think might be relevant. It's literally, hopefully it's fairly clear, it's a section called reasonable adjustments or similar, and we give you some information about the process, what you might expect. We give you some free text boxes to share with us. We also kind of, obviously that information is treated really confidentially, and it's only the team that handle adjustments that see it. It doesn't impact any kind of hiring decision or selection decision or anything like that. So yeah, I guess my two main points would be, think about how you're impacted in relation to the assessments you might be sitting, and then think about telling us as soon as you can when you've recognised that might be relevant to you. I don't know, Ellen, if there's anything that you'd sort of like to add at all?
Yeah, I think just very briefly, just to echo really what you've said, I think the key point is when you feel comfortable to do so as well, and not because you feel like you've been forced into doing it because, you know, it's been too early or anything like that, but just recognising that it won't hinder your application. If anything, the more we know, the better, because like Kim said, we can help you through that and just tailor it to exactly your needs, because you deserve the same chances, albeit be a little bit of extra time or anything here and there. So just when you're comfortable, but definitely not to be afraid to do it, or there's never any judgment, as there might have been, you know, many years ago.
Nicole and Gary, same question. It's like a tennis match, this, isn't it?
I think I'm going to leave this one to Nicole, given it's particularly aimed at the student population for entry, and then I'll pick up on anything that's more general.
Lovely, thank you, Gary. So I think we're in a similar place to Kim and Ellen. So whilst we are aware of certain things that can affect particular neurodiversity, so we are aware of some trends for autism, for ADHD, for dyslexia, for dyspraxia, and there are some common themes. Individuals are unique, And much as Kim said, not everybody has a diagnosis. So that's why we do ask similar questions around what it is that how people are affected and what it is that people need. So even though we appreciate that there might be some common themes, you know, everyone is unique. And so it's best for us to understand that so that we can look at our processes. And I completely agree with Kim and Ellen also around at the time you submit your application, please let us know. Particularly because we use a blind review process, as I indicated earlier. That means that actually we wouldn't necessarily, so we might send that out for review, for example, and actually that person wouldn't know unless we made sure that, you know, because it could be that, for example, we have to focus more on content and less on structure, or make adjustments during, you know, reading responses to questions, and therefore the earlier that we know the better, and to make sure that it's reviewed appropriately. So yes, I completely would say similar for us. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Nicole. I suppose there's a, sorry, Gary, do you want to add anything?
No, I was just about to say, I was just about to get ready to say I've got nothing to add. So.
Well, I've given you the platform to do that, if that helps. Thank you. But there's certainly something about when working with your organisation, sort of disclosing or sharing neurodiversity really just it opens up the conversation. It starts a conversation that you then have with the individual. And like you say, once you've met one neurodiverse person, you've met one neurodiverse person. Everybody's different, has different strengths, and might need different adjustments. And you sort of touched on this already. It kind of semi makes this next question a little bit redundant, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, hoping. What adjustments have you made, just to give an idea of the sort of thing that maybe students might think about? What sort of adjustments have you made for neurodiverse people during recruitment processes in the past? Are there any more common ones? Yeah, I'm going to throw that at you.
I mean, I've had some recent experiences, so I'll relate to those. Adjustments are simply if someone, strangely enough, it's when someone, the example I've got is someone didn't disclose, but we noticed that there were anomalies in the CV that made us think that maybe someone had dyslexia. And so we took it upon ourselves to explore that and, you know, advise the hiring managers who are assessing the CVs that because we come from academia, you know, attention to detail, etc., is key to them. So we had to knock that out of them to let them know that, hold on a minute, this person could. So bear that in mind when reading the content rather than the structure. And as it turned out, one of my team members is dyslexic. So she was able to just jump in on the conversation and help explain to the manager at the time. So the adjustment there was an unconscious one, i.e. it was undisclosed, but we recognized it because of our sensitivity to the potential. Other ones we've done for people who have told us that they've got, I was going to say, it's because I suffer from this and I don't know what the medical term is. We try and do it where we have interviews. Our interviews are run so that when people walk into the room, they're not facing the blinds. Because the problem I have is I'm going to point here because I've got blinds on this window. If I can look out through those blinds, no problem. But if someone stands in front of them, it will give me an instant headache. I go dizzy and I start losing all sorts of concentration. And the trouble is, every single one of our external windows at Welcome has these blinds. So what we try and do is teach the managers to say if people are aware that someone has an adjustment they need to make sure that they sit first, so they have the choice of seating in an interview room. If someone has disclosed that is an issue, then make sure they're positioned accordingly. And obviously there are all sorts of other adjustments that we would make that are bespoke to the individual, you know, and we tend to sort of, you know, we tend to be open and ask. We ask, I think, about 3 times before we meet someone, yeah, at application process, at screening process, and then an interview process. So as they're invited to do all of those, we ask the question. So we give people fair opportunity to know that we're trying to help as best we can.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think, you know, for early careers, so we have an application form which is question-based. So we've already talked a little bit about, you know, sometimes the need to focus on content versus structure or spelling, etc. So, you know, if we know we need to do that, we absolutely do that. Or as Gary has indicated, if we suspect potential for it. And then we have a video interview. Now that gives preparation time for, you know, candidates to sort of prepare and then respond on video interview. Obviously, sometimes timing, being able to order thoughts, you know, can be problematic. So either we can extend times, or we can remove times, or we can allow people to kind of resit those. So if we know in advance, that's something, you know, an adjustment that we can quite reasonably do. And then common ones, you know, as Gary said, when people are actually coming in person, we can make adjustments there. So again, a lot of it does come down to sort of timing, focus on content in my experience. But for sure, there will be other things, and it's very individual.
That's great. Thank you very much. Do I want to pass that over? Or shall I? There's just something I want to mention at this stage, and that is that if you're a student and you want to talk about any of this, if you want to talk about disclosing or sharing your neurodiversity with an employer, you can just make an appointment with the careers service, and we can go through all elements of this, kind of how you want to do it. As we've heard here, you don't have to supply medical reports or anything about that. It's kind of in relation to the job, I think, or in relation to the recruitment process. So, and we can give you some ideas of things you might want to start your discussions with an employer with as well. So hopefully that's useful. Kim and Ellen, did I give you a chance on that last question? I've forgotten.
I forgot as well, but if I'll say something anyway.
What adjustments? That was it.
Yeah. So I can give a couple of examples, and I think I sort of reiterate the point that Gary and Nicole made, that it certainly is very individual, and because we give you the opportunity to request what you think you might need, we do make all sorts of quite kind of bespoke and also not necessarily very kind of big adjustments either. Sometimes people have literally just requested, can you make my interviewers aware of a certain aspect of my behavior so that it's not awkward if that happens in the interview, and that can actually go a long way in just making it feel more comfortable. Some really common requests we do get requests for extra time for our timed assessments. That's absolutely something we can do and tailor like the amount of time that might be needed. We've been able to provide kind of a bit of extra information in advance about kind of interview questions or assessments and things like that. To kind of use a specific example, we had an autistic student a couple of years ago who said that she just found dealing with unexpected situations really hard. So what we did for her was we sent her a picture of her interviewer, so she actually was prepared in advance to know what the person she'd be talking to would look like. And then we sent her some information about the structure of the interview as well, so that she knew what to expect and could kind of go through with that. At the moment, our process is kind of pretty much all virtual. So students would be using their own technology, but you're allowed to use kind of, if you use any assistive software or spelling and grammar checkers, things like that, that's all fine. And if we do kind of return to in-person assessments, for our assessment day, we do actually have laptops with assistive software loaded onto them that can kind of be pre-booked as well. Do I have anything else to add? I think the only other thing I would say is in terms of, there are lots of things that we can offer, but we also recognise you might not know what you need, especially if this is the first time that you've been through, for us, a graduate recruitment process. So even if you don't know what the solution might be, do just let us know what you anticipate finding difficult, and then we can collaborate on the solution. Because if we know specifically what the challenge is, then we can think of potential ways around that as well.
That's really useful. Thanks so much for that. That's great. I've got one more question. I recognise that we're kind of tight for time, and this was going to be sort of 30 minutes. We've slightly run over, but I've got one more question whilst I've got you here, if that's all right. Do you? And it's kind of the classic end question, really. But in terms of the people who are attending here today and the people who are going to watch this when it's released as a podcast, what are have you any specific advice and tips really for neurodiverse students in general with regard to careers, recruitment processes, whatever really? What are your top tips? Who shall I go with? PwC. We've gone that way again. PwC to Kim and Ellen.
Yeah, of course. And again, really happy to answer this in conjunction with Kim. But I think just being honest about your sort of your needs and when you feel comfortable to do so is going to set you up for the best practice during your application. And even something like what Kim said, if you aren't sure whether you need extra time or something like that, even just having the interviewer aware, just because it can be more difficult or intimidating doing this all virtually. And I know this is something we've all embraced in the last year. You might find it is more awkward than it would be in person. So just making sure that you are completely open and honest, I think, will just make everybody relaxed in the situation and then perform at your best. Probably similar to what you were probably thinking, Kim, but that was just really adding on from your last point.
Yeah, super. I can do a couple of tips really quickly. I think the first one I'd say is kind of sort of tacking on to the end of Ellen's point again, just going back and forth. But for any employer that you might be thinking of applying to, research their application process and the role that you're applying to. So find as much information as you can, and hopefully it will be on their website or similar. It is for PwC. Think about what the assessment might be asking of you, and if there is anything that you might want to have a conversation about. To do that in advance might really help. And then secondly, and we touched on this at the beginning, but really think about your strengths in connection to maybe your experiences or the neurodiversity that you have, and think about how you might want to articulate those if it's relevant, and you're able to kind of actually articulate what makes you a strong candidate. That can be a good thing to think about in advance as well.
Thanks, Kim. And Gary and Nicole, anything to add?
I was going to, sorry, go on, Nick. This is about students. You go, it's your seat.
Definitely interested in but I was just going to add, so I think I agree with all of those things. I think they would apply for us certainly as well. You know, to the point where people have used examples before, you know, of how they've overcome obstacles. And, you know, if you can sort of situate that and you're comfortable with that, I think that's great. You know, coming back to the points we made about this also being an added benefit in many respects as well, and a strength. But I would say, practically speaking, I know some people need more time. So I've experienced that before. People have advised me of that. And so I think finding out when applications open, starting them as early as possible, I think is really good, sound, just pragmatic advice to allow yourself as much time as possible to complete them. So I'd probably add that. And then I would also, building on the point that was made about researching the processes well, I would go a step further and actually research the programs that you are joining as well to see if they will be suitable. So, for example, we have quite a high volume of rotations on our graduate program. But we also offer some 2-year non-rotational areas as well, and thinking about, you know, which could be better. That could be something that people want to consider as well. So not just the recruitment process, but how will you be supported once you're actually on a program? You know, does that program suit you in terms of your needs? So I think, you know, going that bit further, because the last thing you would want to do is sort of go through a great recruitment process, but then find actually that the program setup wasn't, you know, wasn't helpful. So they would be mine.
Yeah, the only thing that I feel as if I wanted to add, because Ellen stole my thunder, is yeah, right from the outset, straight off the trap, is if you can't find the information that you're looking for on the website when you're doing your research into either the role, the company, or the organisation, or the development opportunities available to you, don't be scared of asking either. Yeah, most recruitment teams have an email address, or I doubt very much they have phone numbers nowadays, but they have email addresses and ways of, or chatbots, that ways of connecting with them. And you will find that most sophisticated recruitment teams aren't shy of helping people when they ask those questions. And it comes back, I know it's difficult to use the word trust, But we are actually here to help. One of the missions that we and I probably speak for the hundreds of thousands of in-house recruiters that exist out there. One of the things that we are manifestly concerned with is the candidate experience, making sure you get the best out of it, because that is what you experience is a reflection on our organizational brand. So we will do absolutely everything we can within reason. Like that, I always use that phrase. I'm like a lawyer, get out of jail card, to make sure you have a good experience, and it's a fair one. Regardless of the outcome, you can finish the process either with a smile on your face with success, or with a smile on your face and you gave it your best shot and you were treated fairly. That's so vitally important to us because it's important to you. So I think that's my only thing to add.
That's great. Thank you very much, Gary. And thank you very much in general. We're kind of over time, really. I just want to say, the students who've attended, if you have any other questions, feel free to send me a message and I can facilitate throwing that around if the panel are happy to sort of retrospectively answer anything you may specifically have. But just to kind of pick up on a few of the key messages that I've got from you, I think, it's with regard to careers, the recruitment process and neurodiversity, there's something there about, thinking about what you could potentially, some of the words you've used today, things like creativity, problem solving, resilience, hyper focus might be my favorite term of the day, actually. I think that was Kim who said that. But thinking about some things that may be connected to neurodiversity, and you could use those as strengths, basically own it. Research employers, ensure that you thoroughly vet them when you with welcome trust in PwC. I have no worries, but it is always worth doing your research to ensure that you're kind of comfortable disclosing and everything else with the recruitment process, and essentially start the conversation, really. Have open communication, lines of open communication with the employer during the recruitment process to ensure that the playing field is level. Any adjustments you require in order to level that playing field kind of happen, and that's the key messaging, really. I think that's right, isn't it? But I could definitely have said that in 2 sentences, and I said it in about 2 minutes instead. So I hope that's okay. Right. So way over time. So I really appreciate you spending this time with us, really. But I hope and I'm sure students would have gained a lot from your thoughts on the value of a neurodiverse workforce, on neurodiverse students, as well as thinking about disclosure and adjustments and everything else. So without further ado, just to say thank you so much again to Ellen and Kim from PwC, to Gary and Nicole from the Wellcome Trust, for taking the time during this Neurodiversity Week to spend it with us and to help our students. So thank you very much indeed.